Episode 7 of HBO's We Are Who We Are was titled Right Here, Right Now, number 7. The friend group fractures even further over their hatred for Colonel Wilson, whom they blame for the tragedy that rocks the base. As Caitlin momentarily pauses her self-discovery journey and Danny fully commits to his, Richard's insubordination reaches a breaking point, forcing Wilson to make a difficult decision. Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of HBO's We Are Who We Are. We're talking the 7th episode, which was very emotional, has some questionable moments from our characters, and a lot to really break down in this spoiler discussion. Before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you all can stay up to date on what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Make sure you all subscribe, and while you're at it, hit that bell so you don't miss any of my other HBO TV coverage, movie reviews, live streams, all the fun things we do on this very channel. It would mean a lot to me if you all can make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Helps out the channel, but also really appreciate it. And in the comments, let's discuss the 7th episode. Let me know where you guys were at the end of the episode. What do you hope to see as we wrap up this incredible journey with next week's finale? Let's have a discussion about it in the comments below. So yeah, man, this one's, first and foremost, just kind of overall thoughts. It was the longest episode of the season thus far. I think it clocked in right around an hour and 13 minutes. It was an emotional roller coaster. It was almost like this sense of like dread, and I didn't know what the characters were going to do next. They were so kind of on the cusp of doing some dangerous things, some terrible decisions. We get some reveals towards the end, which I kind of predicted in the weeks ago. So we're going to break it all down. But I would say overall, I love the direction of Luca in this episode. I love some of the character moments. And then there were some acting moments that didn't hit for me emotionally, and we'll talk about it in the breakdown. But overall, as an episode goes, I thought it was a emotional journey for the positive, and just leads into what I hope to be an incredible finale. But we'll talk about that at the end. So let's just go over this recap here. So it opens up with the episode showing that it is Thanksgiving time. We see a bunch of turkeys being delivered, but more importantly, we get the follow-up to the call that Sarah got last week regarding that some tragedy has taken place, and we kind of get into that here in the opening moments of the show, where we learn that there was an explosion that took place, and you can just see the distress on Sarah's face, because you can just tell she's kind of maybe questioning that move to sit in on those young men. I guess as we find out in this episode, she neglected to finish up the 90-day training, which we knew that from Richard. So we can just see the stress on her face, right? And especially as the camera kind of pans to the list of kids that or the men that died over in Iraq was Craig, and she kind of obviously puts two and two together. Craig attached to her son, obviously attached to Caitlin, which, so on and so forth. So you can just see the stress on her face once she finds out this news. And also, too, as we all speculated weeks ago in episode 4, when they had that, my least favorite episode, when they were celebrating for Craig's and Valentina's wedding, this was the last time we were going to probably see him. And obviously that came to be true, which we'll talk about a lot of things that I kind of predicted in episode 4, 5, and 6 with Valentina and Danny and, Sarah and Maggie, and this type of agreement they have as far as exploring other relationship. So we'll get into all that stuff, but it was confirmed. And as you can see in the opening moments, they showed Craig's dead body in the background quite a few times, just a really, again, hitting home the emotional impact of what this can mean to our favorite characters. So we see after Sarah tells Jonathan to go back to her house to get her clothes, that Fraser wakes up and sees Jonathan, and Jonathan tells him to go to bed, but we see Maggie goes to the office as well. And very interesting moment for Sarah. She has no shame in her game, right? As we see her get her uniform from Jonathan, she just changes right in front of everyone else, which obviously kind of puts some people in discomfort. But again, this kind of goes against Sarah's kind of mindset regarding just kind of being open, more free, and how we see just kind of her personality is just very, again, really doesn't care what people think of her. And I think that's one of the reasons why Caitlin kind of gravitates towards Sarah, right? Just because of her kind of non-boundaries in regards to the norms that society put on people, her being married to a woman, her being a colonel, her being in this high position. I think Caitlin really kind of sees a little bit of herself in Sarah, but I thought it was a very interesting scene, no less. But as we kind of move forward, we see the signs of the word of getting out on the campus, as we see the soldiers running across the area, as kids are kind of whispering, there must be something going on, because you don't supposed to run on the base. base. And as we kind of move forward, we see Kate tells Fraser about her meeting with Sarah later that day, which we know that wasn't going to take place. And we start to get the hints of something tragic has happened as we see the students get called into the gym area, and the announcement is made that one of the students' brother was recently killed overseas, which again, we know it as the audience what's going on, but then obviously it really hasn't hit our main characters yet, such as Fraser, Caitlin, Danny, and then, Sam's not at school. He's been trying to reach Caitlin all day, and then we just finally see Brittany run into the office, or run into the gym, I should say, and that's where it hit home, and we see Fraser doesn't know what to do. We see Caitlin break down as the phone rings, and we assume it's Sam. We see Danny break a pencil, which again, we'll talk about Danny a little bit later, and kind of, again, something I predicted a couple weeks ago, the relationship with Valentina, but it was just, again, it was heartbreaking. Again, we've been on this journey for 7 weeks now. We've come to know these characters, kind of get an insight of how they feel and where their mindsets are, being so young and in the early stages of life, but it really kind of hit me emotionally because I've come to really like these characters, and them, even though we knew this was going to happen, it was still kind of emotional to see them get that news. As we kind of move forward, we get this incredible kind of beautiful montage of the people of the base just kind of standing still in various places around the camp in kind of a moment of silence, right? And we kind of see that embracement of how, again, even though everyone on the military base has their own troubles, has their own drama, has their own families, has their own lives, when they lose a soldier, and especially when, a lot of them, it seems like Greg, not just Greg, we don't know the other two characters, but just in general in life, when you lose someone, especially in the military standing and on a military base, no less, you see how emotional that is for the entire base and how this is going to really shake things up. So moving forward here, we see an interesting moment from Sarah as she explains to the other soldiers what happened exactly, as she explains that one of the machines didn't scan the roll properly, and in doing so, there was an explosion on the road, killing Greg and the other two gentlemen. And she mentions that they were prepared and nothing could have prevented this mistake from happening. So the reason I'm pointing this scene out is because we get a similar kind of, I don't want to say cold answer or kind of cold reaction to the death of these three soldiers, but I'm notating this reaction from Sarah, something that we're going to talk about in the next scene with Fraser, and also something that Maggie says in regards to how they have kind of how to handle death, and particularly when it comes to soldiers. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But moving forward, we get this conversation between two students in one of their poetry classes of Caitlin and Fraser, and they're kind of having an argument about, one of the young ladies say that they should just find those people that killed the soldiers and hang them and kill them and burn them. And then the other kid's just like, you think that's the proper thing to do? Us U.S. soldiers or our soldiers were over there invading their lands. And it's obviously a conversation that we all have in the real world regarding warfare and perceiving that notion of invading people's land and, how things kind of shake up. And this is a much greater conversation. But again, I think Luca's kind of pointing the pulse on society in regards to the youth, how they see war, right? In a very interesting matter of how that conversation went, because within this conversation of frustration, Fraser opens his mouth, and we all know Fraser he's a very interesting character. I think Jack Dylan Grazer has been really diving into this character, and he's just all over the place mentally. We don't know where he's at. We don't know if he's going to slap his mom, hug his mom. We don't know if he's going to say something kind of in the right moment or say something inappropriate, but he definitely says something inappropriate in the wrong time, wrong place, wrong time, right? Where he says out loud that he goes on to mention that soldiers' coffins are filled with rocks due to body parts not being found. Just a really inappropriate time to be making a comment like this. And we even see Caitlin looks at him like, really, Fraser, this is the right thing to say right now in this moment. But it goes to kind of show, again, this unspoken disorder or the way he was raised. That it's just a certain thing about Fraser where he just doesn't know when in the right time to make certain comments, when to react a certain way. So again, I think this is a moment where Caitlin's kind of realizing again that my best friend, there's something off with him. There's some loose screws in his head. And also, again, goes back to my conversation about what Sarah said earlier regarding her kind of emotions or lack of emotions of the situation. And we'll get to Maggie a little bit later, but definitely an interesting moment. As we kind of move forward, we see that Kate confronts him about, like, why did you say that? And he says to her, well, he's a soldier. Again, very similar to what his mom said and what something Maggie's going to say a little bit later. But, that wasn't the right thing to say for Kayla. And she shows that because she slaps him right in his face, and which I thought that was going to be like, oh, I wonder where their relationship's going to go. But we see that they They don't have like a spoken apology, but we see that they kind of are still friends by the end of the episode, no less. But this was a moment I've been kind of mentioning for a couple weeks now, guys, regarding Valentina and Danny. We see that Danny goes off with Valentina on her bike, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. But again, interesting thoughts on Danny regarding his relationship with Valentina, as he knows that his brother, essentially his best friend's dead, but he's having this, I guess we could say an affair, because she was married to Craig, but she was cheating on him, and I got a hint of that in episode 4, but I definitely highlighted in episode, I think 5, when we saw them at lunch together, and I'm just like, there's something going on there, more than just like a brother-in-law of sense protecting, Craig's wife while he's gone. It was something there, and we'll talk about that kiss a little bit later. But we see Jenny is handling the news as Maggie tries to comfort her in a sense, and Jenny kind of pushes her off, which kind of sets the mood and sets the tension within the scene. And when she see Jenny talking about Craig, saying how he was so nice and that he was Danny's best friend and how polite he was, this, that, and the other, and she gets a little emotional talking about, we need to protect these kids, we need to keep an eye on these kids. And again, another family member within Sarah, Fraser, now Maggie, she says, well, you're not making any sense. Craig was a soldier. Again, putting this thing out there where it's like, if you're a soldier, you automatically putting your life on the line. So you need to understand that their death is a different situation than just a normal death or something else tragically happening. So they're kind of very cold about this. Again, they didn't know Craig personally. They've only been on the camp for less than a year now, so they don't have that emotional connection. But at the same time, they have this very cold approach about how people are handling this grief for someone that was close to them. But nonetheless, the big thing within the scene is Maggie calls things off because Jenny calls her out for not being a mom, not knowing how she should feel. And then Maggie just says, I hope things were different, but she essentially calls things off, which we'll talk about them calling off this relationship, right? But as we kind of move forward, we see the kiss, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that Danny and Valentina kiss, which I wonder how long this thing has been going on. Was it before Craig and Valentina got married? Was it soon as they got married? Again, when they had that dance scene in episode 4, it was almost like, Danny felt awkward, but was it because he was awkward because he was dancing with his best friend's wife, or it was awkward because it's like, I wanted us to know that we have this thing, again, knowing something that we learned later in this episode, did Craig know that maybe, Danny was sleeping around with Valentina and he was okay with that? I mean, it seems like a lot of the families and friends and people in this base seem to be very open when it comes to relationships. So maybe that is something that we find out in the finale, but maybe it isn't. But something to think about, right? So we get these signs of Kate starting to not trust Sarah as we see her rip apart the brochure with the therapist. We see Danny lets his anger out as he's beating on this metal post. We see Sam walks away. Brittany's walking away. We just see the tension. The group is really kind of fractured at this point. We see Sarah gives her speech at the kind of funeral, remembering those that have fallen, and Richard is clearly upset. We see him kind of getting more and more upset, getting more and more drunk, and we know that was going to eventually explode. And I mentioned earlier, I really enjoyed the direction. There was a couple moments of the acting. This is one of them when Richard's drunk and he's calling out Sarah and, starting to fight with his other peers. I wish the performance there was a little bit stronger. Him pretending to be drunk just didn't hit it for me. I get the moment. I get the frustration in the scene. I get the naturalism in that scene, but I wish there was a little bit more. Again, everything about this show is very raw, honest. It's just capturing these actors acting, but that acting moment just didn't hit for me personally, and I wish it was a little bit stronger. But again, I get the sentiment of the moment. As we kind of move forward, we see Kate and Fraser trying to catch up with the others, and we kind of saw this coming again. The group really not. We see them embracing Fraser, but we know that's not really real and honest. But we see that they say, we don't want Fraser to come along with us because his mom's responsible for Craig's death. And, Kate's trying to say, that's not true, this, that, and the other. And Fraser just says, go ahead and go with them. But we know that division was coming sooner rather than later, right? As we kind of talked about many, many episodes ago. We see that one of the generals or colonels or someone kind of at a higher rank tells Sarah that she didn't have the right to make that call, which we'll see what kind of comes of that decision from that colonel that came at her. We see that the crew, of course, minus Fraser, heads off to the house from episode 4. I'm just thinking to myself, oh boy, This house, episode 4, I was not a fan of, as you all know, because we saw that as the scene kind of goes on, they bring out the alcohol, they get the drugs out. I'm just like, oh man, these kids are going to make a terrible decision here, and we kind of see that taking place at first, as Sam's dancing and everyone's dancing, but he breaks down and starts to cry. We see all of the group starting to hug each other. Valentina goes out in the rain. Danny follows her. They have an interesting discussion about her being a widow at the age of 19 and that she's going to be forever attached to Craig. And Danny makes a interesting remark calling him an asshole in regards to Craig. And again, I don't know if that's a smarky remark, if this is how he really feels about his best friend, if this is something that's been building for years, but a very interesting comment no less, as we see Sam be taken away by Caitlin in a private area, and we see Brittany sees that. We see Fraser goes, and this is a very interesting scene. This is yet again something I speculated a couple weeks ago regarding Jonathan and his relationship with Fraser. We see Fraser goes to Jonathan's house. He's half naked when he answers the door. His friends over there that we met last week, they let him in. He gets some water. They have a discussion, this, that, and the other. And the party gets interesting as we see them dancing. Both of them, again, are half naked, as we know in this scene. And they start to take off Fraser's clothes. He starts to do the same thing. And as I had mentioned a couple weeks ago, and not that it was a matter of being right or wrong, but I'm thinking that Jonathan is flirting with Fraser. And a lot of you all, and again, it's not a matter of right or wrong, but a lot of you guys like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. It's more of like of a brothership. And I'm just like, okay, we'll see. And as we see in the scene, he starts to kiss Fraser and they start to hug. But Fraser, this is too much. This is overwhelming him. We see him run out in the rain, and we see him obviously upset. Now, I'm thinking he's upset because either he's upset with the situation, upset with the girl being there, upset with how everything played out. He might have wanted more romance within that moment, wanted to be more special, to maybe hook up with Jonathan for the first time. Or he was just, again, we know Fraser can have these moments where he just makes decisions, out of left field. So a very interesting moment, and I wonder how their relationship will be like moving forward in the finale. But again, I did suspect that Fraser and Jonathan were going to have this type of moment, but definitely wasn't the moment that Fraser was looking for, right? As we see him heads home, he drinks a whole bottle of hard liquor. He's drunk. Sarah and Maggie find him. He says to Sarah, his mom, you send these people to die, right, Mom? Like a death wish. Did you send my dad to die? Which this is the first time we're really hearing about his dad, as we find out that his dad was a mechanic and he met Maggie, or I should say Maggie met him once, in a very interesting conversation about, a little bit of their past. I wonder if that's something we're going to explore in the further weeks, or I should say the next week's finale. We see Fraser again, or Sarah says we don't talk about ghosts. So obviously his dad died, I assume in war, or died as a mechanic or something of that nature. But I wonder if we'll get more information about that. But back to Sam and Kate, we see that Sam says, I can't love anyone else. We see that he kisses her, and Brittany sees that. So I don't know what becomes of their relationship moving forward, if Caitlin's really just there for him because she feels bad for him, or if she's on her self-discovery journey. She's just going to go back to, this kind of relationship that she had with Sam. If this was just her just feeling bad for him and allowing him to vent and kiss her. We'll see what happens next week. We see Danny having yet another breakdown in front of everyone, and it's definitely a mixture of him being upset, him seeing that his secret girlfriend is upset, him being high at the same time. He has a breakdown. We see them destroy this house, and I'm just like, good gosh. Obviously it's fictional, but things like that, I'm just like, you guys are making some bad decisions. I know you're in your raw emotions right now, but you are destroying this person's house. And then again, Danny is yelling and hugging everyone, and asks if Craig is dead. So I think there has to be some type of undertone of either jealousy, aggression, hatred towards Craig, his best friend. And again, going back to being a teenager, we've all had best friends where we just either were upset with them for a while, jealous of the situation they're in. We still love them, but there's this underbelly tension towards a certain best friend. So I can understand Danny, but I hope we get a little bit of clarity of where he stands with Craig in next week's finale. As we kind of wrap up the episode, we see Kate and Fraser, or I should say Kate calls Fraser to pick him up, and we see that Sarah and Maggie pick up, Danny and, Sarah, or I should say Danny and Caitlin. We get another moment, another reveal that I had mentioned 2 weeks ago, when I was just like, like, I wonder if there's some type of understanding between the two, Sarah and Maggie. And we have this interesting conversation where Sarah tells Maggie to cut off the relationship. So she's very aware of the relationship that Maggie had with Jenny. And as the conversation goes to the bedroom, Maggie mentions that, Richard has to move. He's a hothead. And I'm thinking to myself, is this like a setup? Did like Sarah set Maggie onto Jenny, and this is something they maybe do on a regular thing when they go to different military bases? If someone gets out of line, Maggie sleeps with that person's or the other person's, whether it's male or female, they sleep with their wives or their significant other. I wonder if that's something that they do. And remember last week when they said this truth, we gotta come to some agreement. I wonder if this is something they do on a regular basis in regards to setting up others and getting in this relationship to kind of fracture the house or get information from the other person. Very interesting scene, no less. So again, wrapping up the episode, we see Fraser and Kate staring at each other over a Skype call as they fall asleep. And the episode ends with Danny again as we see Caitlin kind of shying away from her journey as self-discovery. We see that Richard's doing the opposite and really embracing Islam and embracing his praying, embracing his religion, embracing his culture, as we see him laying out his prayer mat, praying in front of the truck of Richard, and proceeds to pray. As the episode wraps up, we get this beautiful orchestra as the camera pans up in the sky, the rainy sky. Again, something I had mentioned a couple weeks ago when we saw that storm brewing. The storm is now here. So that was the calm before the storm in a sense, right? But overall thoughts, wrapping up this review, I thought it was a incredibly directed episode. Again, there were some acting moments. Again, the Richard moment, but being drunk and being emotional and being upset with Sarah. The kids in the classroom, we really haven't seen them on screen before. When they had their little bickering match, I felt like those actors were very green, very new actors, and really didn't hit the marks per se. But again, that was a small scene. But overall, collectively speaking, what now for the finale? Which relationship going to be like with Jonathan and Fraser? Obviously the relationship between Caitlin and Fraser looks like they're somewhat still friends, but we'll see how their relationship goes with, Caitlin kissing Sam now. What's that relationship like? As well as Brittany in the mix. And then the Valentina, as well as, everything with Danny and Maggie calling it off with. There's just so many things that I'm just really excited to see how this wraps up. But I thought this episode was beautifully told. It was emotional. It was an emotions that was earned on this 7-week journey as we go into the finale next week. So let me know in the comments your pros, your cons. What do you all think will happen in the finale? And as always, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other coverage. Check out all of my reviews that I've put out in the last few days. More Lovecraft Country coverage from my live stream, my extra special video that I made, movie reviews, other TV reviews. So I'm hoping you all are enjoying the content. Hope you all are staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.